The man nearly eaten alive by ants. Henry Pym was a scientist. He was working on a secret formula that would shrink objects and could even grow them back. After years and years of tirelessly trying to make it work, finally one day he got it to work. He took his formula and poured it on a chair. The chair shrunk way small. Then he took the other vial and poured it back on the chair, and the chair grew bigger than it was before. Henry Pym was so excited. His formula finally worked. As he sat there, he thought back to the days when he went to the science community and talked about his research on the secret formula he's working on. They laughed at him and said he's wasting their time and he should work on practical projects, that this thing would never work. But now that it worked, he thought of all the cool things that he could do with it. He could reduce shipping costs by making items super small to ship. He could shrink down entire armies so he could transport them so much easier on a plane. But there's only one thing that he needed to do next. He had to test his serum on a living object. So he decided to test it on himself. He poured the serum over his arm, and it started to work. He started shrinking faster and faster, smaller and smaller. Frantically, Henry Pym races around the room, and fear grips his heart. Finally, before he knows it, he has stumbled through the open door. He stumbles outdoor, and he doesn't know how he'll get back or how he'll get the antidote to make him big again. He starts screaming for help, but no one can hear him. He has such a small voice, it sounds like a tiny little squeak. But Henry Pym is wrong. Some ears do hear him. Unfortunately, it's a hill full of ants. Henry Pym gets very quiet and starts moving slowly through the brush. He's trying to avoid the ants at all costs, but just then the ants spot him. They start to surround him. Henry Pym doesn't know what to do, so he starts to run. He sees a tunnel up ahead, so he thinks that he can run and hide in the tunnel and maybe the ants won't spot him until he can figure out how to grow big again. So he's running through the tunnel, then the next thing you know, he falls. He screams for help and he lands far below, deep inside the tunnel. And then splat, he lands into something sticky, but it's sweet. It's actually honey. But then he realizes this honey is for the ant's food. He has found himself inside the anthill. Just then a giant ant starts crawling towards him. At first he's scared, but then he realizes the ant is pulling him out of the honey. The ant decides to let him go, and he's not harming him. But then suddenly, the remainder of all the attacking hordes of ants start closing in, and Henry Pym falls back into fear. But up ahead he sees a matchstick, and so he takes up a pebble and he throws it at the matchstick and it lights on fire. That distracts the ants just long enough for Henry Pym to climb up out of the anthill. Just as he's about to get to the top, he sees another ant. The ant grabs him and starts to squeeze him. Henry Pym feels like this will be the end of his life. And he starts thinking to himself, man, this ant is too strong. But the one thing I do have is I have a human brain. And so he uses the art of judo and tosses the ant off the cliff. He gets out of the anthill and keeps running back to his lab. He can see the window that's open with the antidote sitting on top of the shelf. But it's too high up. And then he looks behind him and he sees more ants following him. He's too tired and he just can't run anymore, and he thinks this is it. Then just when it all seems utterly hopeless, Henry recognizes that one ant that saved him out of the honey. He wonders if he points to the ledge, if the ant will help him one last time. And by some miracle, the insect does understand, and so Henry Pym jumps on the back of the ant, and the ant takes him up to the window. Henry Pym grabs his antidote and takes it, and he starts growing big again. He's finally back to normal size. And the first thing he does is he destroys all of his serums. He says it's far too dangerous for any human being. Then at the next monthly scientist meeting, all the scientists ask him, so how was your experiment? Did it fail? And he says, yes, they were right. I was just a fool and it was a waste of time. And so our tale ends. Except for one brief note, never again did Henry Pym knowingly step upon an anthill. For he knew that somewhere beneath him, unknown and unrecognized, was one little insect, one small ant to whom he owed his very life. So this story might seem a little familiar. This is actually the first appearance of Ant-Man. It's in Tales to Astonish 27 from 1962. But at the time, Marvel was mostly just doing like monster sci-fi stories, and so they didn't have any intention of making him a superhero. But then when they got back into the superhero game, they brought back Henry Pym and they made him the Ant-Man that we all know today in issue number 35. Now you might be wondering, why do they call him Henry Pym? Isn't his name Hank Pym? Well, they actually changed that too. His name is actually Henry Hank Pym. So Hank is kind of a nickname, but it kind of stuck. So that's it. I hope you liked it. Have a good day.